Welcome to PL Together Lounge Talks. I'm Adam Geller, founder and CEO of Athena, and today we're talking with Amy Tepper and Patrick Flynn. They're the authors of multiple books, including one called Feedback to Feed Forward, 31 Strategies to Lead Learning, which we're going to be talking to them a bit about. They're also the founders of an organization called Tepper and Flynn. Amy and Patrick, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Well, maybe a good place to start for folks that are unfamiliar with your work is telling them a little bit about Tepper and Flynn. And good news, the brand name is the last names, right? But so tell us about you, but also tell us about what is your organization, Tepper and Flynn, about?
Amy, you start?
Patrick.
we always start. Well, we've been working together for about 8 years, and that was after several years of working as teachers, administrators, curriculum directors. And when we met each other, we were working primarily in Newark, New Jersey, with Newark Public Schools. And we had a contract there to support observation and feedback practices. And we completed about 400 per year through our organization. And we were in classrooms observing and then providing one-to-one feedback to teachers. And we were utilizing that to try and look at the way in which administrators and leaders were providing feedback to teachers and supporting their professional growth. So when Amy and I were involved in that project, we continued to kind of expand on that and built Tepper and Flynn and built Feedback to Feed Forward really from the origins of that work over the course of the last couple of years.
Well, really, I think, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Adam. And just to jump in, so over those 7 years since Newark, we've been out supporting teachers, coaches, and leaders in this work. And that, though Newark was sort of the kickstart, we have just been out in the field every day building an understanding of what teachers need, and then also building an understanding of what the observers need to support those teachers.
Yeah, what I was going to add there was that, no, you're fine. You're fine. I was just going to say, I think oftentimes, the educators, sometimes they want the research kind of approach to thinking about things. And sometimes they want the adapted, interpreted version of how the research plays out in the real world. And it sounds like you're really bringing that to bear, where kind of the motivating force behind your work is having been there and been doing that work over and over again and seeing and learning those patterns. Let's start with some good news, because there's a lot of things happening that are making us uncomfortable, feeling like changes are happening. So let's start with some good news. Maybe, Amy, can you share an example of an educator that you've heard that's changed something or adapted something, and that story, kind of gave you some extra energy to apply to your work? And when I say educator, it doesn't have to be a teacher. It could be a coach or a school leader.
It's interesting because so many incredible things are happening. And so to identify one is really difficult. Something that grabbed me, if we're thinking just on the fly, because there are so many unbelievable things happening, creatively, I think is where we're seeing teachers just pulling out the stops, any ideas and things they have just in their homes, making things work for kids. And adapting to learners' needs really quickly. But I saw a picture of, and then quickly went out and did it myself, of how they were using their phones as dot cams, but stacked up on pots and pans and whatever they could to get it the right height to ensure they could keep doing their think alouds and show their stickies. So just the ingenuity has struck me tenfold.
I like that. The dot cam on top of some pots and pans. I haven't heard that one yet.
Pinto beans.
Yeah, actually putting the bag of beans on top would be really good, because then you can level it out.
Yeah.
Well, let's, we're going to focus on a couple of different topics. I think we're going to draw from the book itself. For those that haven't seen the book, they kind of really structure things around some big kind of overarching questions. And one of the first questions that you ask in the book is, what does it mean to lead learning? And I think that's such an important question for right now, because what does it mean to lead students? What does it mean to lead teachers? What does it mean to lead schools? Wow, we're like totally rewriting all these definitions. So let's take them one by one. Let's start first with teachers. What does it mean to lead learning as a teacher right now? I will go to Patrick, and I'll do a better job of tossing between you two. And this is, you know,
trying to queue between the.
That's okay. That's okay. Like, see, I'm realizing we're all learners here, right? Like, we're all starting all over again. I'm okay on the one-to-one interviews, and this is my first two-person interview, so I'm learning as we go.
Great.
Well, and I would yield the teacher side to Amy. And I think when we talk more systems, I'll tend to chime in more often. But Amy, you want to start with that one? Because I really do believe you'll go after the lead learning for teachers differently. So,
you know, it's interesting when we think about when this occurred in a school year. You know, if this had occurred early in the fall for the first time and we had barely had a chance to know our kids, I think we'd be in such an incredibly different place, our teachers. But because they've formed relationships and bonded and gotten to really know their kids as learners, now leading the learning as a teacher from March until the end of the year looks different. So very quickly, it's sort of tied even to my ideas of what I'm seeing them do in ingenuity and creative ideas. Leading the learning is really first understanding and making sure your kids are okay and knowing what's happening in their homes. You know, we continue to be enlightened, like, you know, we live in our existences, but how many siblings have to share a single device? How many, you know, in our towns in Connecticut we support, we still don't have devices in kids' hands. So to lead the learning has to start with knowing those kids even more than we knew them when they walked out the doors in March, and understanding family dynamics and supporting and working around those as best we can. And then going beyond that is really diving into what's working for our kids. How are we impacting them? Why are they struggling? Is it a tech issue, a time issue, or do I just need to create a tutorial quick screencast to support them? So I think there are a lot of different layers right now, and that leading learning in the fall will be an adapted version of even what we're doing right now as teachers.
I like that. You know, I've been talking to some other folks about this, you know, the issues of equity right now. I feel like you kind of brought that forward as the first and most important thing, which is, and it said another way, like, what do the students need, right? Because you can't just bulldoze in with the students still have to be learning. You have to first leverage those relationships that you've been building all year long to be able to access and understand, like, well, what do those students really need right now so that they can get back to the learning.
Right.
Because I don't think we're not wanting to sacrifice the learning, right? It's not, we're not throwing our hands up and saying, well, all right, see you in a year.
Right.
Well, Patrick, let's maybe zoom out a little bit then. You know, we were talking about the like kind of one classroom view. Now let's think about it from the view of the people around the teacher. So maybe that's the coach, the team leaders, but also the school leaders, right? They're leading those teachers and inspiring and invigorating those teachers through this challenging time. So how have they been shifting, or how should they be thinking about shifting their work in this new context?
And to answer that question, I think I'll go back to something that we always talk about, and that is that what is and what we see as really good for kids and students as learners is the same we see for teachers and adults as learners, right? And that's understanding where they are, what they need, and then being able to individualize and support them in a very specific way. It actually led to a recent rewrite of some of our work and the creation of what we called 4 stages of development within inside an online environment. And I think, you know, teachers need the leadership, they need the coaching that is going to meet them where they are right now. And they may have access issues. They may have trauma issues, right? Right off the bat, I think we saw a lot of that. And we continue to see, I think, that grow in certain ways when we see teachers who are struggling over time because they just don't have access to their kids. They don't get to see their kids. And that's a really important thing for a coach, for a leader to be able to understand. And then it's as you're working with those teachers and you have to be able to move into that next phase of really being able to analyze the impact of the learning. But you know, once again, we have to be ready for that. And so taking all of those dynamic things that they're doing and then really connecting them back to, are kids learning as a result of what you're doing inside your classroom? in your virtual classroom. And can we replicate that to be able to continue to ensure that that learning is occurring? So when we talk about what coaches and leaders are doing to lead learning, it's really about the same principle. Get in with those teachers, support them, provide them with that feedback that really allows them to grow as teachers.
I think there's, often we talk about personalized professional learning and all these things, but I think, you kind of pulled it right to the forefront. Like, we have to meet the teachers right where they are as well. And there's an image that maybe I saw it in the New York Times. I'm not sure. It was just really stuck with me, which was it was a teacher sitting in, I don't remember if it was a male or female teacher, so we'll say his or her car in the parking lot of the school. And, it brings into stark relief the need to remember all the things happening in everyone's life right now. And, it's kind of like, yes, as the school leader or the coach, you have to be the kind of helping uphold those high standards for where you want to end up, and not let up on what that vision is for strong student outcomes. But at the same time, taking into account the people that are part of the process.
It's that thinking that led us to the development of this series that we created as a free resource. We recognized our leaders and coaches needed help in how to lead the learning. And so one of the most important tools inside that series is a creation of stages. And so it's to help leaders, coaches, and even peers identify at what stage those students and learners and teachers are existing in that moment. So we can support them based on these 4 stages. And interestingly, we have some, who are already in stage 3 and ready to go. We're hearing, they were already comfortable with technology. They've got a stable dynamic at home. And so, by giving a tangible tool and some potential look-fors and some guiding standards, we now have a resource to help leaders provide that individualized feedback and support that you're talking about.
Is that 4 steps? Are those on your website? Would that be something people can see kind of listed out?
Yes, on our resources page, we have a special link out to school closure resources, and we've pushed all of that out for free so that it's available. We just finished part 4. The first part is really just to focus on an understanding of what does it take to teach and learn online. And then the second part is where those stages live. And then part 3 is to help leaders, coaches, and peers learn how to get into what's happening with the learning to better identify the stage.
Mm-hmm. Well, why don't you give us the web address that we know where to look? I know how to spell your names, but you can tell us and then spell it for us, so everybody that's watching this or listening to us can know where to go before we need to wrap up here.
It's easy as tepperandflynn.com. So it's TEPPERANDFLYNN.com.
All right, tepperandflynn.com. Well, Patrick, Amy, thank you so much. We will continue the conversation. This has been another PL Together Lounge Talk. You can find the continuation of this conversation as well as other conversations at pltogether.org. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.